round 3 here this afternoon at Amaroo Park.
Well, Bob Stevens has made pole position in the Monaro by a time of 51.8. Alongside him, John Burke in the Celica. He was 2/10 slower. On the second row, and the man to watch, I suggest, Peter Fitzgerald in the Porsche, with Neil Brain alongside him in the Chevy Monza. Then Brian Thompson in 5th place with the Mercedes. Bob Tyndall in the Tirana is alongside him. Russell Kramer, a driver we didn't see now run down pit road, in the Falcon. And then Graham Stones in a Mazda. Tony Herbert in an Escort, and Laurie Hazelton in his Fiat V8 engine Capri. Joseph Saeed in a Fiat is next up, and Mal Rose in a Tirana. Gary Wilmington is next on the list in 13th spot, unlucky 13, and then there are another, oh, how many? 20, well, there are 25 altogether, let's leave it at that. So it's a big field for this 10-lap race in the Comalco Wonderlic Sports Sedan Series, and the action up front. Brian Thompson, I might suggest, is probably the last of the drivers we could expect to see with a real winning chance, although Bob Tyndall went well in an earlier race, and Russell Kramer going by in 35 always puts in a strong effort. They're now going out on their warm-up lap just so that the drivers can see what the track looks like, and it is certain to be a little change after the incident which eliminated so many cars in the previous race. Well, one of the most interesting drivers in the race, certainly in the most interesting car, is the Victorian veteran Brian Thompson, running this time in the Special Mercedes. There's his background. As you can see, some of the top drivers aren't exactly chickens, but it's experience as well as skill which counts, and Brian Thompson's been around for a long time. He's driven overseas, as you can see. He's had experience at Bathurst, and he's still driving with great flair. Brian Thompson in the Mercedes, which he's taken over, another driver having initially developed it. It doesn't have too many Mercedes-Benz parts around it, but it's certain to stir the heart of any person who loves the three-pointed star. There it is. Not the sort of Mercedes you expect to see waiting outside the school to pick up the
very affluent school.
Well, it'd be a quick school, wouldn't it?
Well, the two men, of course, that have dominated the Comalco Wonderlic Series so far have been Bob Stevens and Peter Fitzgerald. John Burke has been in there, and so too has Bob Tyndall. So I think Brian is in for a fiery Amaroo initiation here today.
Stevens leads the series with 15 points. It's still wide open, though. Burke's got 9 and Fitzgerald 6, as has Laurie Hazelton in the Capri, which is starting from 10th position on the grid, the 5th row. It'll be a big field, though, almost back to Wonderlic Corner.
Well, Burke, of course, has had that Celica turbocharged this year, and that's made a lot of difference to him. Last year, this series was basically Fitzgerald versus Stevens, but Burke is right in amongst it in the series now, standing second on the point score. And as you pointed out, Evan, with the advent of Brian Thompson in that big Mercedes, that's just added yet another dimension to the Comalco Wonderlic Series here at Amaroo Park. This should be a great race.
Burke didn't make a good start in the preliminary, and it's a rather frightening prospect to know you've got so many big, fast cars behind. If you don't get off the line quickly, you can be sure he'll try hard. There's one of the big, fast cars, Neil Brain in the Chevy Monza. Not much clearance under the car. These big spoilers at the front designed to keep air out and to shovel air where it's needed. Cool the brakes, to cool the radiator. Peter Fitzgerald, he makes demon starts. I've never seen a driver who is so consistently quick off the line, and the Porsche will certainly suit that characteristic. And if he can get a good start and wedge his way between Bob Stevens and John Burke, well, he well and truly is in the hunt. 30 seconds to go. But alongside him, of course, Neil Brain in the Chevy Monza can be expected to go quickly too. The Chevy gets its power down, and how'd you like to be the last man in the pack? That's Alan Taylor, I think, in a Tirana, looking at all that field up in front. You're thinking,
you'd have to be optimistic.
Yes, well, I mightn't win this one, but I'll see what goes on.
Not far away from the flag going up. About a few seconds away from the start. And just look at the view as they get away and go racing in round 3 with a lightning start from Fitzgerald on the inside, and Thompson trying to following up as they head up with Bob Stevens on the inside, but I think Fitzgerald, no, Stevens hangs on.
Fitzgerald had the start. Stevens muscled his way past them into the corner. That was pretty dynamic driving. Brains up there in 3rd spot, going a very good line inside, and the field pouring through on the first of 10 laps.
Coming down towards Mazda corner, and it's the Amaroo specialist, Bob Stevens, in front. The Victorian challengers, Peter Fitzgerald in the Stanlite Porsche, and Neil Brain up in the Monza into 3rd spot, followed by Thompson.
Thompson's done well, hasn't he, to get up so well in these early laps in a big car.
Racing down towards the lake corner, and the pressure certainly on Stevens here for the first time.
John Burke off the front row. The grid's been shuffled back to 5th position in 1 lap.
Stevens will lead across the line. There's the field coming through as they go over the start-finishing line now. So they're one down. Thompson making his move on Brain. And Stevens, if anything, increasing his lead. Here's Thompson up on the inside of Brain, but still Stevens there. Open up marginally that time on Peter Fitzgerald. Then Neil Brain in car number 76, the Chevrolet Monza. Brian Thompson in the Mercedes Chev.
Well, Thompson doing everything but passing Brain. There he goes. He says, that'll do me. You show me the road I'm going. And he went. That was like an arrow being shot out of a bow. And didn't he go? My heavens, Thompson is quick. He is worth watching. He's got that non-typical Mercedes really flying. That was dynamic driving the way he disposed of Brain. He's made already 2 car lengths on the leaders who have locked in combat in on the inside up in front by their Porsche trying. I don't know whether he can get through. He said that'll do me too.
Oh, and Thompson's through as well.
Poor old Bob. There he is. Look at this. How's that for getting into the lead? And Brian Thompson is in front. And the other Stevens is gone. Stevens came around the corner. He's out of control on the grass, spinning his car around.
He's okay. There's the rest of the field going beneath as we pick up one of the slower cars about to be lapped by Brian Thompson.
Well.
The Shepparton driver having his first outing in the Chevy Mercedes here at Amaroo Park, and he has hung them out to dry.
Bob Stevens is back on the track, but at the rear of the field.
And I'm trying to think, when was the last time we saw a Mercedes-Benz leading a race at Amaroo Park? I can't recall ever.
The vintage and historic day, perhaps.
Well, 2 lightning passing manoeuvres on the one lap, and Thompson's in front.
When he plants the foot, you wouldn't want to be standing in front of him.
No, I wouldn't like to be crossing a road if he was coming around. And here's Peter Fitzgerald closing up. He said, how did you get by? I was watching what was going on behind, and you came from nowhere.
Back across the line again, and it's Brian Thompson. The 2 Victorians, Thompson over Fitzgerald, across the line again. And this is where the Chevy Mercedes goes up over the top of the hill and starts to open up. There's the gap, first to second, and then a fairway back then to Neil Brain in 3rd place. Stevens is going again, but still back in the pack as Brain takes one of the slower cars, number 44, and that's Mal Rose in the Tirana as they come down towards Mazda Corner. There's one that's not going to make it, 747.
Yes, he's had a jumbo-sized problem. Graham Nolan. Yes, Graham Nolan has parked the car.
No, he's on his way again. No sooner said than done.
He just lodged the flight plan, and he's off.
Neil Brain.
That's a good-looking car, isn't it? If you like the exotic shapes that appear in sports sedans. An American design, the big Chevy V8, a real shark nose there. And Brain running where? In 3rd place.
Yes, John Burke in the Turbo Celica is just behind Brain, about 3 or 4 car lengths. He's the man that came off the front of the grid and whose car is not running as well at this meeting as we've seen it previously. There he is.
He's under a little pressure himself. That's 77 going through, John Burke.
Again, not your average shopping Celica, just like the Mercedes is not a true representative of the breed. The Burke Celica has been fairly well fiddled with. But as you were saying, Gary, not going as well at this meeting as we've seen in the past. 2 slow starts, which have cost him dearly, because you get behind in this sort of business, and it takes a lot of catching up.
They take the right-hand corner in at the lake in 4th spot. Neil Brain up ahead of him, and of course the leading pair, Brian Thompson in the Mercedes and John Fitzgerald in the Porsche.
They're heading up Pitcher Hill once again as we pick up on the leaders, just going through into Dunlop Loop. And there's the gap back to 3rd with Neil Brain. Car number 76, Burke back a spot behind him in 4th. And Stevens still trying to make up the ground. He lost, and he went out into the Toolies near the lake. There's Peter Fitzgerald. Thompson, little ragged coming out of that corner.
Yeah, Thompson's learned his way around the track. Now he's trying some other parts.
Well, Fitzgerald closes up from here to the Fitzgerald a little sideways that time, but has been closing dramatically coming down to the lake corner. That's probably the biggest gap that Thompson's had over Fitzgerald. Just look at the 17 machine as it comes up to Wonderlick Corner again, and we'll follow him up the front straight here at Amaroo Park. So close to the ground.
This car has ferocious pace up the straight, and that's where he pulls away from the Porsche. Really flies up the top of the hill. A dab of the brake, not too much of it. Comes over the top. He's got a Mazda in front of him. They'll have to pass on a tricky part of the track, because that driver's got his hands full. Thompson comes sweeping round. He takes good lines. You can tell the experience of the driver there. He's soon learnt this track. And he really has opened up for himself a fairly considerable margin over Peter Fitzgerald.
A great campaigner, Evan. Brian Thompson, been around the sport for a long time.
He's gained an enormous amount of experience, and that's something that Peter Fitzgerald is gaining in great lumps, not by dint of the years he's been racing, but the number of races he contests. He's in at least, what, 3 different categories of racing in this meeting, in the Stallion Stables Goodyear Series, and also running in the
Super Series,
where he is a leader.
The Sports Sedans.
That's a fair bag of tricks for a driver. It's pretty hard work. They say that Amaroo is the most difficult race circuit in Australia from a driver's point of view. Many of them like it because there's a challenge every half second. But there is absolutely nowhere to race, even at Mount Panorama, probably the most testing track in Australia. You do get the chance to rest on some of the straights. There are no long straights here.
Well, I mean, they must like it because Brian Thompson's another one that's got his hands full driving in several categories today, and there are several other drivers competing in both open wheelers and sports sedans.
And look at the way Fitzgerald is just chucking that Porsche around. Picking it up by the scruff of the neck and throwing it into the bends.
I was going to say, if he hasn't got a tyre going off, he will have shortly.
I was wondering, in fact, whether his tyres were starting to go because of the way the tail was wagging, and maybe he's just come to terms with the fact that he's using a lot of, putting a lot of energy through the rubber, which can cause the tyres to go off. 2 laps to go. 2 laps to go. I don't know whether he can do it. He's driving desperately hard. There's no greater trier in motor racing at the moment than Fitzgerald. But I think that Thompson, who started from 5th spot on the grid, has this race in the bag. He's got himself nicely in front. First time out here in the big Mercedes, and he's doing everything right. Here he comes. He's got a slower car to pass. He just lapped another one, which Fitzgerald has to get by.
There's quite a gap now, isn't it, between Thompson and Fitzgerald. The last lap and a half or 2 laps, Thompson really has opened out a pretty fair lead. Fitzgerald's car, as Evan observed, perhaps not handling quite as well as it might, indicating that maybe the tyres are going off. Thompson appears to be having no such troubles. The broad, flat wedge of this futuristic-looking Mercedes eating up Vitchepave Hill and over the top with 1 to go.
This is certainly going to throw the whole series much more open, with Thompson, who hasn't got points, presumably going to collect maximum points, with the leader Bob Stevens out of the race. John Burke will get minor points. Peter Fitzgerald will add to them. We'll end up with a number of drivers very close together, and Thompson suddenly in contention. So it does make for interesting racing a little later on. And just behind Thompson, still Fitzgerald throwing that Porsche around, but unable to do much about closing the margin on this man, Brian Thompson, the veteran, running here for the first time in the Mercedes-Benz, and only 1 more corner, 1 lick to go round before he wins this heat of the Camalco 1 Lick Sports Sedan Series. Well, a great win to Brian Thompson. He'll be pleased about that, Gary Wilkinson.
Yes, big effort. First time out at Amaroo in this car, which, as we said, is a handful indeed. And he's mastered the circuit and mastered the opposition to take the checkered flag, with Peter Fitzgerald taking 2nd place, and Neil Brain did well. He circulated without ever threatening the leading division and managed to hold off the challenges of John Burke in the Celica right throughout. And it's panned out that way. Brian Thompson 1st, Peter Fitzgerald 2nd, and Neil Brain 3rd in the Camalco 1 Lick Sports Sedan Series round 3 here at Amaroo Park.
Sorry, Gary. The man who must be kicking himself, obviously, is Bob Stevens, who led the series, but and was running strongly in this race. As you can see, Thompson had gone through to take over the lead. Fitzgerald had already hung Stevens out on the wall to dry, and Stevens, coming out of Camalco Corner, goes off on the grass and out of contention. Tried to fight his way back through the field, but unfortunately it was Thompson who stayed out in front to beat home Fitzgerald and Neil Brain in 3rd place.